Hello and welcome to the West Yorkshire Football Show. I'm Gareth Walker and today we're here with a Bradford City special where we'll be joined by Width of a Post editor Jason McKeown to discuss what came out of the fans forum the other night at Valley Parade. Jason, how are you?
I'm good, yeah. How are you guys?
Yeah, not too bad. We do have a little bit of a delay here, so we're going to hope that there's not too many technical problems, but we're going to get straight into it. And I want to discuss, Jace, like this forum was really important the other night, wasn't it? Because we've not had one for a long time. And also because the owner of the club, Stefan Rupp, was there. And sightings of him have been pretty infrequent over the last few years. So just how important to you was it that he was there? And also what he said about wanting to have feedback from the fans, both good and bad, and also how he's going to be more visible around the club in sort of the next season and beyond.
Yeah, I think it's a really good start. Start is definitely the key word here. He said a lot of really encouraging things. The intentions that he got across were very laudable and things that we would all want our owner to do. And the ambitions that they talked about for this season and the way they're going to do things differently are all really, really encouraging. And it's all about delivering on that really now and making this the new normal now from now on here and in, because it has been too quiet. He has been too distant. He hasn't been there when there's been some really difficult moments and the club has had a real vacuum of communication, and that needs to be fixed going forward really. And it's great to see him doing that. There's a few caveats to that though, is that since he's doing it in the middle of the summer when fans are a little bit more switched off watching the Euros, and the tensions aren't quite as high as they were because we're not in the middle of a campaign of ups and downs. So it's a good time to come in terms of start of set his stall out and do things further forward, going better. But he needs to be following up throughout the whole season and be there in the difficult moments, which will happen, as well as those quieter moments as well. And if he does all those things, it's great, and we can look back on this and think this is the start of a new way of leading the football club that we can all be on board with. So hopefully, as I say, it's a start, and hopefully it's one that we build on from here. I mean, you were there, weren't you? Obviously on Tuesday night, Gaz. What did you make of it being there in person and seeing him and talking in person?
Do you know what? Like, he gets a lot of criticism, doesn't he? And I think a lot of that comes from him not being very, very visible around the club, and we don't hear from him very often. But the bits that we do hear from him, and the people that you hear that have spoken to him, he always comes across as a fairly decent guy who's got good intentions overall. He's just probably in a situation that he didn't expect to find himself in, and things have gone not how he expected them to go, and not how any of us wanted them to go. But I think, and I'm hoping that obviously the protests and the anger that we saw last season has prompted this reaction, and we're going to see a change in tact from him, and we are going to see more of him. And I believe that we will. I believe that his intentions are good. I believe that everybody at the club has good intentions. I don't believe anybody working at Bradford City is there to do a bad job. I think they're all good guys who've got the right intentions, but it's just that things haven't gone right in the past. And he mentioned something about the way you improve is to learn from your lessons, and hopefully that's something that we'll see going forward. Obviously, we've brought David Sharp in, which was something that we all were sort of clamouring for, someone with a bit more football experience. That's one step forward. Maybe that's part of the investment that he's talked about. Maybe some of that is in paying for David Sharp to come and help Ryan Sparks out. I mean, David was there the other night as well. I was a bit confused going into the other night. Like, I think other people were as well on exactly what David Sharp's role was at City. Are you any clearer on that after the other night, on what he's going to be doing and in relation to what Ryan Sparks does?
Probably not really, but I mean, I wasn't there in the room like you were to understand it better. But what I've got to say is, reading sort of the transcripts of what was said on the day and who communicated, he came across really well to me. Some of the comments he said, he seemed to be really humble and very much, showing appreciation to other people at the football club and really bigging them up in a really positive way. And I thought the way he spoke came across really impressively, in print at least. I mean, obviously in person, what was your impression of him?
Very professional. You can tell he's got experience of doing this kind of stuff before. It was interesting that, obviously, I don't want to go into transfer rumours too much, but he played the Charlie White question with very straight back. Didn't want to be drawn either way. I get the impression that he'll keep his cards close to his chest. The club will be run very professionally with regards to the footballing side of things, and that can only be a good thing. Obviously, Ryan has done his best up till now, but we know he's not a football man, and I think that having someone there who's got that experience. He mentioned, I've just got a few notes here that I jotted down. He said he can be involved in anything from signing players, recruitment meetings, staffing, physio development, head of performances. He can have meetings about the training ground and recruitment. He obviously, what was also interesting that he spoke about, he said that Graham Alexander's work ethic is phenomenal and compared him to managers that he's worked with before. And obviously he's got that experience of working with managers before. And he said that the way that Graham Alexander sort of conducted himself since he's been in the building, the way he's worked hard over the summer, was something that he was very impressed with. So to hear that coming from somebody who's, like I say, he's worked at Wigan, he's worked with lots of managers, he's worked at a higher level, that was really refreshing. There was also, I think I mentioned to you when we were chatting the other evening, via text, the fans that were in attendance, there seemed to be a lot of love in the, well, I say a lot of love, but people were very positive about Graham Alexander. And he is someone else who came across very well on the evening. I think he comes across very well in interviews that he does. Are you on that same page with Graham Alexander? Are you very positive about him at the moment?
Yeah, as you say, I think he speaks really, really well. Obviously, we had an encouraging into the season where results were much improved and the style of football was better, and it was quite attack-minded with what he was doing there. So I was encouraged by that. And I think his record overall since he took over was something like fourth best in the division from the point he became manager of Bradford City, which is really encouraging as well going into next season. So definitely a lot to like there. I think when it was bad under Alexander, it was very bad, and some of the football at times was absolutely awful. And that Salford game on the Tuesday night always sticks in my mind as just one of the worst games of football I think I've ever seen in 20 whatever years it's supporting Bradford City. It was just absolutely awful. So it's not pretty at times, but I think when he's got the players and what he wanted to do and they were all there, yeah, I was really encouraged by the way he wanted to do things. And there is echoes of Phil Parkinson a bit with the way he goes about doing things, isn't there, really? So it feels like he's got that statesman-like about him, and also that he really gets the football club. So there's a lot about him that I think fits really, really well. And it was really encouraging, as you say, to hit what David Sharp said about him and the way he praised him, because, David Sharp's worked with some excellent managers. And if he's saying that about Alexander, that does really bode well, doesn't it? And hopefully what we see over the course of the season is making sure that we do back Alexander through that season. Just don't want another repeat of sacking a manager halfway through the campaign and it all being on him if things don't go to plan from day one. So hopefully that's the case, and he's got that support around him. And those warm words that David Sharp made towards Graham Alexander, hopefully that's backed up over the course of the season when we have the ups and downs.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that we have been too trigger happy in the past, but I think a lot of that comes from the fan base, because obviously the fan base were built up as like pre-season favourites every year, and when things aren't, we get the big crowds, and when things aren't going well, it's almost like it turns toxic very quickly because our expectations are so high. And I think this might be the time to stick with a manager. I think we need to stick with somebody. I agree with what you said. He's got I think I said to you when we first appointed him, he's a little bit of a poor man's Phil Parkinson in a way. And I mean that in a respectful way. He reminds me of the way that he talks, the way he conducts himself, the way his teams play. I'm just really positive about Alexander, and I'm hoping that with David Sharp coming in, that this will be the time that we stick with somebody who's got the experience to ride the situation out if things aren't going so well. If we have one of those bad runs, I know, like you said, when things were bad, they were really quite bad. We went from like no wins in 8 at one point and lost those 3 or 4 games on the bounce in March. And we've stuck with him so far, and I'd like to see us do that again, really, if that happens again next season. Obviously, it's not just us, and it's the whole crowd as a whole, because the stands were very empty at one point, and we don't want to see a repeat of that. But the fact that season tickets have been bought in the numbers and the positivity that we have around, I think, Alexander on social media, and that was certainly in the room the other night, I think that's something that we will hopefully see, and there'll be a bit more long-termism about us going forward.
On that one thing I got after, Gaz, and you were there in the room, there's this guy who apparently said he'd been supporting Bradford City since the 80s, and last season was the best he'd ever experienced because of Graham Alexander. What's going on there? Because I would love to meet this guy and just ask him, are you really saying that finishing 9th in League Two is better than getting promoted to the Premier League and the History Maker season? Like, what's that about? Come on.
It was a really strange comment, a really strange one. He stood up in front of her, older fella. I think he said he was 80 odd, been following the club since 81, 82, and 82, 83. Yeah, and came out with that. And I was like, I hope that's a slip of the tongue. I hope that's a bit of stage fright talking in front of everybody. You know, when you're saying that last season was the best, you think, forget about 2013, forget about 1999. Our ninth place finish in League Two was the best he'd seen. So I'm hoping it was a bit of stage fright, but he was extremely positive. He asked a good question later on about the pitch, which I'm hoping that we'll come on to at some point tonight. But yeah, I'm hoping it was a bit of stage fright because you can't take anyone seriously that says something like that, can you? Graham Alexander also was asked about signings and transfers, and he said, I've just written down here, he said that he sees one or two going out before the end of August and 2 or 3 coming in, of which a couple of those at least, maybe all 3, but a couple of them are likely to be loans. What's your view on that? And are you happy with the business that we've done so far?
Yeah, I'm kind of reasonably okay with the business so far. I know that a lot of people start to get a bit stressed now, don't you? And you just go on the hashtag on Twitter, what's left of the hashtag without all the awful spam that's on there. And it is a lot of people getting quite stressed now and quite worried about it. And they're getting to a point that, we haven't seen loads of players come through the door. It isn't, edgy seat excitement at the moment. And when you talk about this idea from Stefan Rupp, they're going to invest more this season, they're going to have a real go with it, then maybe that isn't seen at this moment in time. But having said that, I think that the squad we have generally, when everyone was fit last season, was really good. The moments where we had dips were when we had players who were out injured. And of course, we'll get injured again. But I think it's about getting that strength and depth there and really, really pushing that bit rather than thinking we need to sign 7 or 8 players who are going to be go straight into that first team. I think that what we have is the makings of a really, really good squad, to be fair. And I am worried about losing Matty Platt. I am one of those people definitely who's not happy about that, him leaving. I think he's a big player for us. His record when he played is fantastic. When he was out was not so good. And think about that time in March when we had a real dip and everything went really wrong. That was when Matty Platt was out, and there's no coincidence, I don't think, in that. So I am worried about that part of it. But I think some of the other signs, they look decent and solid. And yes, you're looking for a few more to come in without a doubt. But I don't think it needed a big overhaul and massive changes. I think that we have got the makers of a decent team there that just needs strengthening. So I'm sure we'll get there. Obviously, there will be players who will leave, and it's going to be for the best. I think the TNS named for Daniel and Kevin McDonald, hasn't it? So can't get more explicit than that, could it? Them to the players who are obviously seen to move on and obviously will be on good money. Certainly, Verdane Oliver will be. And yeah, that makes sense, and it's for the best, really, isn't it? Really. So we're still looking for a left back, probably. I think we need, someone there, a real specialist wing back. I think to make that formation work. Whether that's Tyreek Wright returning or someone else, we'll have to see. Probably defensively, maybe one more needed there, and then maybe a wide player. Maybe is probably what we need as well, really. And if Oliver leaves, some sort of foil for Andy Cook, obviously, as well, is going to be really important because we know last season that was a real problem. But we're not talking needing a massive amounts of change, really. I think we are in decent squad. I mean, do you agree with that, or are you one of the people who's a bit more worried?
No, I'm pretty much on the same page. I think that in the past we've made wholesale changes when perhaps we didn't need to. I think last summer's a good example of that. I think that probably that side needed a few tweaks, and Hughes and Gent and whoever else was responsible tried to reinvent the wheel when they probably didn't need to. I think that on the basis, I agree with what you said. I think the first team is a good set of players. It's a good standard for League Two. Some of them will be capable of playing higher. The problem is the depth, like you said. I would expect, again, agree with you, left wing back's a priority. Little bit concerned if Tyreek Wright's going to be that guy, because obviously we tried to convert him into a wing back at the end of last season. He did reasonably well, but he's not an out-and-out wing back. He's been a winger throughout his career. I would like to see a wing back brought in, someone who can definitely start ahead of Lewis Richards, and Lewis Richards probably be the backup left wing back. I agree on Matty Platt. Some people didn't like him, but the record of the team when he was in it was far better than when he wasn't. I think that's really telling. You hit on March, and obviously we had John Tompkinson away at that time. We moved Kelly into the middle from the left-hand side. We had Rydalsh playing as a left-sided centre-back, and it all just looked a mess. We were just really, really poor defensively. The signings that we've brought in, I know very little about Aidan Baldwin. Notts County fans seem to say that he's either brilliant or he's terrible. Hopefully we see more brilliant, and I think a lot of the terrible that they said was when he tried to overplay. Now, hopefully, that'll be something that Alexander won't get him to do, and they'll get him to simplify it a little bit. Callum Johnson, be interesting to see where Callum Johnson plays, because I have a good friend of mine, Accrington Stanley fan, who says that he's the best right back that he's seen play for Accrington Stanley. He was the right back when they got promoted as champions from League Two a few years ago. Obviously got his move to Portsmouth. But I don't see him coming here and starting over Brad Halliday at the moment. So have we brought him as cover for Brad Halliday, or have we brought him in as a right-hand-sided centre-back? Now, if he's a right-hand-sided centre-back, I don't think it's a role that he's played too often. But Daniel Oyegoki showed that right wing-backs or right-backs can be useful in that right centre-back role. So maybe that'll be something that we'll see him play. I'd like to, like you say, a little bit concerning that we're talking about a big budget and how Rupp's supplementing it, and perhaps that's not been seen in signings so far. But then you also go on to what Alexander said, and I think I'll talk about it in a little bit, about him wanting a tighter knitted squad. So maybe that's part of it as well. And if that's the case, then you can understand a couple of the additions being loans that are to come in. One of the fans stood up the other night, and it was a good point, well made, to be fair. And he said that expectations have been dropping year on year, and less people are coming to the ground. And he asked, how does Stefan think that we can reverse that? And Stefan said that obviously he nailed it. Really, it's results on the pitch, and it's learning from our faults. Do you firstly agree with what the fans said about expectations dropping and less people coming? And do you agree with what Stefan said about, it's results on the pitch ultimately change that and learning from our mistakes?
Yeah, 100%. All of that, definitely. There's no doubt about it that the enthusiasm is going each year, really, isn't it? I was at work today with some Bradford City fans, talking to them about the season, and they're all like, "Yeah, I'm not really looking forward to it, really." It's a close season, isn't it? But you still have that buzz at the moment. The fixtures just come out. That's normally really exciting, but it hasn't necessarily had that same appeal. And the weird thing is we look on paper like we really should get promoted this season. It's a weak league. There's not many other teams that really up there. You look at all the fundamentals; they're all there in place. When compared to, say, when Derek Adams was manager, and there was a lot of expectation to get promoted, but you looked at the squad and the signs, and you thought this doesn't tally. There's not enough goals in this team. It's not right really there. And same with Gary Bowyer that year when we got relegated. It definitely feels like this year everything should be into place, but the enthusiasm still isn't there as fans, even though it does feel like we should be excited, because I think we've been burnt so many times by this and had so many dashed expectations that it's hard to get too excited, because we've just dealt with so much disappointment and failure in moments where we genuinely thought we were going to be brilliant and get promoted, and came nowhere near it, really, didn't we? So it is a problem, and I do think this is such a crucial season now for everyone at the football club, for Stefan Rupp, for Ryan Sparks, because there was a lot of things that went wrong last season, and there was a lot of criticism, and they had to get through that. And to an extent, there was a bit of a forgive and forget towards the end of the season with the open letter, the improved form, and the fact now that we are seeing actions and things being different, and promises that the club will be running a different way. So that's all great, but if it doesn't work from here, that's going to be, there's no hiding place, is it really? It's going to become much more intense and fierce from here on in. So there's so much riding on it, really, and it just feels like a really crucial season that if things don't go well from here, where do you go from there? It just becomes a very much thinking we're trapped in League Two forever. We're just stagnating, and the people who run the club don't know how to fix it. So, yeah, there's a lot riding on it, and I think it is about learning from mistakes. And you're thinking of, last season, Mark Hughes this week coming out talking about the fact that it was nonsense he got sacked. I do agree with him to an extent. It was a really harsh sacking. I mean, it's difficult, and it goes back to what you said before about fans. He'd lost the supporter base, so we can't say, well, why did the club sack him? Because Hughes was getting booed at games, and fans really want him gone. Me and you were together at Tranmere, weren't we? And we saw the reaction he got that night. No doubt about it that he'd lost his public, so it's not down on the club for that one. But the mistakes of sacking him without a plan of what to do next, and all the things that happened there, they're all things we've got to learn. And as we said, let's stick with Alexander this season. If we're having some rough moments, if it doesn't start well, let's not hit the panic button. Let's not sack a manager in October and effectively write off another season, which is what we did to an extent last season. So if we see those kind of moments where when things are going a little bit tough, the natural reaction the last few years of Bradford City has been sack the manager, change it around, and it hasn't got us any further forward. It's just been reset after reset. We've got to go through with the manager some difficult moments and come out the other side, because that's the only way I think we can be successful, if we've got that resilience as a football club to cope with difficult moments and to stick with our plan. So hopefully that's what we'll see this season, because it's got to be successful. There really is no margin for error this year, I don't think, really. On the bits on Stefan Rupp they talked about, what for you were the other highlights of what he said and things that stood out for you?
I'm going to come on to that next. I think the two things that I took away from it really was, he talked about, well, I think Ryan mentioned it more, that Stefan was helping us out with supplementing the budget. Now, whether we've seen that we've kind of discussed it already, whether we've seen that in the signings so far, or whether they are to come, and whether obviously moving Verdane Oliver on and Kevin McDonald and the like, we'll see more action in that respect. Remains to be seen. But there was a lot of talk of budgets and how we couldn't compete with Stockport and Wrexham last year, which is fair enough. Obviously, we knew we were in that kind of situation. And I do kind of hope, like you've just said, that approaching things a little bit differently this year, in keeping a squad together, perhaps sticking with it over the summer, and perhaps sticking with the manager a bit longer, might hopefully help us to sort of achieve the success that we've been craving. I mean, he also said, obviously, I wanted to come on to it. He did an interview with Radio Leeds, didn't he, before he actually appeared at the fans forum, and the big takeaway from that was that he's hoping, or he's in early talks to buy back Valley Parade from the Gordon Gibb Pension Fund. He was questioned a little bit about that on the evening as well. He said that he's hoping that talks can progress in the next few months. He described it as being part of the club's vision and its spiritual home. And he also mentioned, which was quite interesting, that not owning it creates complexity, which I thought was quite an interesting quote. Now, the fact that he said all that, and then he also said that he's not currently actively looking to sell Bradford City Football Club. Now, how important to you, obviously, if he's not looking to sell, it becomes really big, doesn't it, that he tries to buy back Valley Parade from Gordon Gibb? That is really important, isn't it, Jace?
Yeah, it's a really key thing, I think, now. To come out there, he's really nailed his colours to the mast, and I think most supporters would agree that's the right thing to do. I wrote an article about towards the end of the season about the Valley Parade situation and what we had and the options there, and there's a fair amount of debate on that, of whether we just build a new stadium, whether we just give up and go elsewhere, or if we carry on where we are, and it's a difficult dilemma. But I think most Man City fans would rather we stayed at Valley Parade and made that our home again, and some of these rental problems that we were to fix and buy back the ground, and that would be a massive thing if we were able to do that. I think when you look at, it's been 8 years now, isn't it, basically, of Stefan Rupp, who's owned Bradford City Football Club, and when you look at the history of Bradford City, there's never been an owner we've had who's had the wealth that Stefan Rupp has had. It's huge compared to any other owner we've ever had as a football club. And looking at those 8 years, it hasn't really been an advantage to us to have that level of wealth behind us. It hasn't made a difference. We shouldn't dismiss it. I think moments like COVID, where there's real uncertainty and a lot of football clubs facing some really difficult moments, we were able to sleep a bit easier because we knew we had, Stefan Rupp there in deep pockets to make sure the club was able to keep functioning. But in terms of that wealth being able to transform the football club and really make a huge difference and take it forwards, that just hasn't happened over these 8 years. And then when you couple that with the fact that, he hasn't got, it's fair enough, some owners we've had in the past maybe weren't the richest, but they had incredible football expertise and they were brilliant in that side of things and therefore made difference in that way. Stefan Rupp's not made a difference in that way either, because he's a distant owner, he's not a football expert, and he's not pretending to be either. So that side of it's not been an advantage either. So you look at it now going, well, where is the advantage of having Stefan Rupp as your owner with everything all coming together? And if you can do something like buy Valley Parade, which is something that Mark Lawn and Julian Rhodes would not have been able to afford to do, Jeffrey Rich many years ago would not be able to afford to do in this situation, that's something you could say, well, that's some big difference that he's made there as an owner of the football club, and a massive difference to the future of Bradford City. Owning our stadium again is something that will set us up for the next 50 years potentially. It's huge. So that's a big thing that he can do, and if you can deliver that to the Bradford public, bring back the stadium back into our ownership, that is a massive step forward for and something that we can really be grateful to him and to be our owner for. So fingers crossed it all does work out, and we'll see where we go from here. I can only imagine the talks are quite far on, because to be able to come quite bold and be bullish in that way, to say that's what we want to do, that's our intent. He will be judged on that now. There's no doubt about it. So that is something there. And if you have got doubts about that, if you're not sure you can achieve it, that's not really a message to go out with at this moment in time when you don't need to. So I think it all suggests that it'll be quite a positive one, that one. And that could be a big thing, because if we can get that rental stuff, we're paying 500 grand, I think it goes up again, doesn't it? A year just on that, and then all the other costs that come with that. And we know on the ground it comes into $1 million, I think, with all the other stuff as well. It could just change the football club dramatically, and suddenly the big crowds we've got suddenly really genuinely are making a massive difference, because we have budgets and resources that outstrip all of our rivals by a much bigger extent than this right now. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens to the next, but definitely is exciting, I think, and a good development. What's your take on it?
Yeah, you kind of hit what I was thinking there when he mentioned that creates complexity. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's restricting what we can do as a football club and how we can maximise our potential from the crowds that we're getting, and obviously possibly the extra money that Stefan's willing to put in. A lot of that's probably now being sucked up in rent, whereas if you get a mortgage, your monthly pay or your yearly payments on the mortgage might be less than you're paying towards Gordon Gibbs' pension fund at the moment. So hopefully, that creates a big positive for us going forward, and we can use that extra cash as you would hope to be able, as you want to be able to use it on the first team. And coming back to what we were saying about the budget and how I think a lot of that's probably been a lot of this extra investment, or the promised extra investment, we probably have still got quite a high wage bill. I mean, obviously Brad Halliday's been given a new contract, and Andy Cook got a new contract last summer. You'd imagine, like you said earlier, Verdane Oliver's probably on quite big money. I would imagine that Kevin McDonald's on decent money as well, because obviously we took him from Exeter on a 2-year deal. They were hoping to keep him. So moving those players on, and then, like I say, like you just said, bringing the payments down that we pay for Valley Parade every year would hopefully be a huge positive. And obviously also the fact that the owner of our football club also owns the ground would mean that if he does ever want to sell in future, they can be sold together. And whoever comes in, because he's always talks about being a custodian, and obviously he's not looking to actively sell us at the moment, which is good, because it means that it takes away a bit of uncertainty. But in the future, when he does pass us on, they can all be sold together. It just makes it a lot tidier. Probably means that we have a lot more disposable cash. And like you were saying and I was saying before, the crowds then become a positive for us, and we can use that momentum that the crowds give us to move up the leagues. The fact that I kind of did a little bit of a smooth transition there to talking about contracts, because Graham Alexander was asked about young players and how, what they need to do to get a chance in the first team. And he said that basically, they need to be as good or prove that they're better than anybody else to get in the team, because obviously they need to earn their place in the team, and they do that by proving their ability in training, that they deserve the shirt more than someone else deserves the shirt. He was also asked about Bobby Poynton's contract. Now, obviously, we've tied Brad Halliday down. We tried to tie Jamie Walker down as well, but Bobby Poynton was the third person that we were talking about wanting to give a new contract to. How important is it to you, Jace, to see young players in the team, but also how important is it to you that we tie Bobby Poynton down to a new contract going forward?
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? Because you saw what Bobby Poynton did at the end of the season. He was absolutely superb for us, and he had to wait so long for the opportunity, and it felt like he was being treated unfairly, to be honest. And I think, as much as we praised Graham Alexander tonight, and rightly so, he got it wrong for quite a long time, I think, with Bobby Poynton, and I'm sure he admits that himself, because it was almost like he'll play anyone there but Bobby Poynton. And then when he finally did play him, and he was absolutely brilliant, he just proved it, didn't he, really? And he's such an asset. He's a player that can just grow and grow, and you can see him playing at a high level. And with that in mind, you've got to tie him down so that we can command a really decent fee for him, because you don't want to risk him going. Albeit he's young enough where even if he left at the end of a contract next year, we get a fee, but it wouldn't necessarily be as good a fee as we would if we've got him tied down on a good deal as other clubs came knocking it. It's just a no-brainer to get him in there. And it's a difficult situation. Obviously, the hint was there was he's changed agents, and that the new agent has played a bit more hardball and perhaps trying to push up that price a little bit more. And is a club willing to do that? Yes, you can see the other side of it. if you're being really harsh about it, I don't know how many games he started last season, Bobby Poynton, but it was probably about 20 or so, isn't it? He's not a proven League Two player yet. He does have a way to go, and we've seen young players in the past. Reece Staunton, Finn Cousin-Dawson probably been good examples of players who really made a good impression, got long-term contracts, and then for different reasons it didn't work out and they didn't kick on, and ultimately left the football club not progressing from there. So there is that side of it as well that you've got to be careful. And certainly we shouldn't be paying Bobby anything he wants. But I do think you've really look at the talent he's got and what he's shown so far. You've got to be wanting to desperately keep him and do what you can to make him feel valued and wanted to remain at this football club. And for Bobby's development, if hopefully that agent he's speaking to is a sensible agent, for him right now, he should be staying at Bradford City. He should be wanting to be here, playing week in, week out, because going higher up, he could easily get sucked up and left in the reserve team there somewhere, never been seen of again, really. So for his interest, he wants to be playing at Bradford City next season, playing 40 to 45 games, scoring 10 goals or whatever it would be, and then really putting himself in that shop window for a bigger move. And in the meantime, if he can get his contract sorted out for us, that just puts him in a position where if he carries on this upward trajectory right now and impressing, he's able to then get a good fee for him. So I think that's really important. And I think then becomes a good inspiration to other young players as well at the club. There's clearly some good talent there. The youth teams have been very successful the last few years and continue to produce some good players there. And you'd like to see them given an opportunity as well. Whether they will or not, it's difficult because, let's be honest, many Bradford City managers in the past who we really like have not given young players a chance as well. It's not something we do very well as a football club historically. And I think that ultimately, if you ask any supporter right now, what's more important, young players coming through or getting promoted? Getting promoted is going to win that. And obviously, if you get young players who gets promoted, that's perfect. But if failing that, then, unfortunately, that's going to be the bigger priority, is making sure we have a team in there that are doing really well. So if we're in the top three, doing really, really well, and there's only probably points in there out of the young players, I think, to be fair, most supporters are probably going to be too worried.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Jesse. It was interesting that David Sharp said about him changing agent and how he said something. I think he said he'd had his first meeting with the new agent that day. So, it's finding the balance, isn't it, between, like you said, not doing what we did with Finn Cousin-Dawson and Reece Staunton, where we threw 3-year contracts at them and then the form sort of tailed off. Or I know Finn Cousin-Dawson particularly was thrown under the bus a little bit by Derek Adams and never really recovered from that. And apparently has done really, really well in non-league last season. He's got his move to Yeovil and hopefully his career can recover. But Bobby Poynton's somebody that we all want to see do well. He's a Bradford City fan. He stood on the Cop as a kid and his form, like you said, after he came into the team, it made you wonder why he hadn't been playing earlier in the season. And I just kind of hope for Bobby that obviously the signing of Sarcevic doesn't make him sort of struggle to get in the team next year, and we still see lots of him and we see him develop. I think we will do. I think regarding, we've got options now in that attacking midfield role. Jamie Walker and Bobby Poynton were really good options for us at the end of last season, but we know that Jamie Walker has his injury problems. Bobby Poynton's a young lad, so his form is going to come and go while he's a youngster. And I would like to see, regarding other youngsters, I think that we need to give them a go, possibly in the, it's not called the Johnson's Paint Trophy anymore, is it? Is it Papa John's Trophy, whatever it's called? I'd like to see some of them given games in that. And then, if they prove themselves in that, then they get a go on the bench in the first team or whatever. It's interesting to see that Alexander said that he wants a smaller squad next year because he said that when you've got too many players that aren't getting in the team, become particularly disheartened, and that can spread through the players and the club, and morale gets really low. So he sees us keeping it a smaller squad as important. But obviously, when you have that smaller squad, it's important to keep your players fit. And we've talked briefly there about Jamie Walker. I mean, he was a big one last season. Obviously, Alex Patterson looked really good players for us, both in an attacking midfield role. But when we lost them both at the same time, our form tailed off, didn't it, quite a lot? So how important is it, Jace, that sort of, I think we've advertised for a new fitness lead, haven't we, or something at the club? I don't know if we've got one in yet, but how important is it that we keep these players fit? Because how badly did it hurt us last year when Jamie Walker and Alex Patterson weren't able to play?
Yeah, it was massive, wasn't it? And, you hear the rumours, don't you, and the rumour mill going around that, maybe that the club didn't handle some of those injuries as well as they could have done, and that there were some questions asked behind the scenes. So it does suggest that there's improvements we can make as a football club there. And I think as well with in this modern age of data science and stuff like that, we should be a bit more on it with stuff like that. Jamie Walker got injured at a point where I don't think Graham Alexander had changed the team for weeks and weeks on end, had he really? And he kept with the same team, and it went stale suddenly, didn't it? And there's things like that you just feel like at times we could just be a little bit better at. And if we have a big squad in the sense that we've got good options, then it is about, can we rotate? Can we bring other players in to keep other people fit? Because Jamie Walker's a fantastic player, absolutely brilliant for us. And, we don't want him to get injured. So if he can't necessarily play every week and if we give them breather every now and again and that keeps him fitter for longer, that's got to be a good thing as well, really, hasn't it, really? So it is important we get those things right because, as we talked about already before, those injuries at times last season really derailed us. And if they hadn't struck, things might have been different. But equally, we all know in future more injuries will happen. So as a football club, how we cope with that, how we deal with that, and how we prepare for that are going to be really, really important.
It comes back, doesn't it, to how the budget isn't everything. I know, Paul's put a comment in here about how other clubs are putting some fantastic teams together, and players from the Championship dropping down to play into League Two, and he really hopes that we can hold our own this season. It just shows you, doesn't it, that what we were talking about there, that obviously clubs are going big this year. You've seen MK Dons, Notts County making some what look like really good signings. But the fitness thing and getting that side of everything right and keeping our big players fit is almost just as important as having those shiny new players and keeping them and spending big on new signings and building a big squad, because it was mentioned towards the end of the evening actually about how in Mark Hughes' first full season with us when we made the playoffs that we had our biggest budget that we'd ever had as a League Two club, and how the switching to recruit into a 3-5-2 last year was Hughes' decision, and how it didn't really work out with our recruitment, and we ended up with a much more bloated squad than we had intended to do. Excuse me. It's much more important, isn't it, to get that right and not to underachieve, because I suppose in a way Hughes kind of, if we're to believe that, Hughes did underachieve a little bit, and it's almost that the fitness and also the mentality of the players is just as important to get right when you've got players coming in with the right attitude, they buy into the ethos of the club. That's as important as having a big squad and relying wholly on the budget, isn't it, Jace? Do you agree with that? And do you also agree that Hughes maybe underachieved a little bit?
I think, there's an element of there is slightly underachieving, but I think what the big thing is last summer is it feels very clear looking back that, and even at the time, to be fair, recruitment and Hughes were not on the same page, and the recruitment last summer was incredibly scattergun, really, really odd, just random at times with some of the players who were coming in, and it just didn't feel like a joined up, coherent strategy. And there's been noises, hasn't there? There's been a few sort of, behind off the record briefings that got into press and in different articles suggesting that they were recruiting for one thing, then Hughes changed tactics right at the start of the season. So, for example, the 3-5-2 became a 3-4-3. But it also ignored the injury problems that we had and the fact that we didn't properly recruit in certain areas. So that the fact that Verdane Oliver, for example, was injured and had an operation, we didn't bring up a backup for Andy Cook, get that sorted out. We didn't have enough striker options, so that when we had injuries, Hughes ended up having to go to 3-4-3 because the squad wasn't quite what he needed to be at that moment in time. I just think it just wasn't gelling together for whatever reason. Recruitment and manager weren't quite there together, and I think that's the key bit this season more than anything for me is, are they genuinely on the same page? Is that working? And hopefully that's where David Sharp is, that big link between everything, to be making really clear, what is it that Graham Alexander wants? What is he looking to do this next season? And then working with Stephen Gent to make sure that that's exactly what they're recruiting. And again, that Stephen Gent's bringing players and recommending players that absolutely fit what Graham Alexander wants. And if everyone's genuinely on the same page like that, then that's where things will be much better this season, because you need to be really clear with that plan, with that identity, and you need everyone to be bought into it and to be really pushing for those same things. I think last summer that wasn't the case. And I don't know why that is. I'm not close enough to know why that situation was like what it was. But I think that the season started with a squad that was just completely imbalanced, wasn't right for what they were looking to achieve. And as soon as a few injuries happened, it all just fell apart really, really badly. And yes, you can accuse Hughes of being culpable for that and of not making the most of the hand that he was dealt with. But equally, there was a few things there that weren't helping him either, really. And I think as a football club, that's some of the lessons, hopefully, that have been learned for this summer.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that it's interesting, or I noticed as the season went on that Graham Alexander seemed to get more out of us playing through at the back than Mark Hughes did. Now, whether that was due to the players that we had, like you said, the scattergun approach, and Alexander concentrating more on a set group of players, I think that, like the fitness, like you said, and I mentioned it before, the mentality of players that you sign is almost just as important as getting the quality and the number right. But going forward, I would like to see us play a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3 and stick with it, and that seemed to work for us towards the end of last season. I think that having cover for Andy Cook is important. So if Verdane Oliver is to go out, it would be good to bring in someone who can play that striker role, who can hold the ball up. I mean, I know that there was one game last season. It was the Wigan game, wasn't it, when we played Tyler Smith and Callum Kavanagh played together up front, and it actually looked really good. But normally at Bradford City, we do struggle when we don't have a bigger guy up front who can hold the ball up. And if we were to lose Andy Cook for any length of time, it would be good to have somebody in who could come in and play that role. And, Andy Cook's going to be 34 during this season. We know that he struggled with his fitness and his form previously. You would hope that he doesn't suffer anything like that. But if he does, we need to have someone who can come in and play that role for us, really. And if Verdane Oliver is to go, I'd like to see someone come in possibly towards the end of the window when he's gone that can do that for us. Before I let you go, Jace, I just can't let you go without discussing, the fixtures came out today, didn't they? We've got what looks to be a tough start to the season. MK Dons away, someone that's thrown a lot of money at it again this summer, and obviously a bit of a case of old manager going back to old club there with Graham Alexander. And then we've got Salford at home, haven't we? We've got Grimsby. We've drawn Grimsby away in the Cup and also played Grimsby away in the league quite early on. And then Newcastle under-21s are the ones that have been drawn with us in the group. What did you make of the fixtures? Any in particular that you're looking forward to going to next season? Any that you're fearing? What you're making? What are your initial thoughts?
I think there's a weary familiarness to it, which is a frustration. It's like, here we go again. All these fixtures that we're used to, and all these away grounds that we're used to, and stuff like that. It would be nice to be thinking next season we're swapping that for a newer looking fixture list. The fact that we're playing Bromley third game of the season, that just feels wrong, doesn't it? I was talking to someone today who actually from the area from Bromley, and like the idea that Bradford City playing Bromley is, it'll take a bit to get used to, won't it? No disrespect to them, but. Yeah, but I think as well the end of the season looked quite tricky as well, doesn't it? We were discussing that, weren't we, on one of our chat groups, weren't we? And it's not easier. So yeah, I think MK Dons tricky start without a doubt, and they're going to have a massive amount of points to prove. Bearing in mind that in the playoffs they were shambolically bad, absolutely horrendously awful, weren't they? Really, and looked like their team that should have got promoted. Certainly favourites to win those playoffs overall, and were awful, weren't they? Really, and you'd think they'd come back really probably most people's favourites to win the league, really. So it's as tough a start as you could ask for, really. But then, it's just the old stomping grounds, the old home fixtures we're all used to, and it all just becomes another one, doesn't it? Really. So, but I'm glad to have the fixtures out though. It's good because you can start planning now, can't you? And it just feels a little bit more tangible. And pre-season's only a couple of weeks away into the friendlies, and it's all starting to come around again now, isn't it? Which is good. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, it like you say, it is a bit of a case of hello darkness, my old friend, when the fixtures come out. You've got these teams that you think, well, we should be in League One, we should be in Championship, but we've got to earn that right. We've got to beat these teams. We've got to finish in the top three or have a successful promotion campaign. I had such a bad tipster, Jace. I couldn't look past Doncaster or MK Dons winning those playoffs. I thought that one of those two was nailed on to go up in those playoffs. I think the league will be tougher for having them in it next year. Like you say, MK Don's bit of a point to prove after getting hammered in the playoffs. And also, us first up, their old manager, Graham Alexander, we battered them 4-0, didn't we, towards the end of the season at Valley Parade. I thought that they looked a really good footballing side, but were suspect to us when we broke on them defensively. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. I also believe it's been picked for Sky and will be shown on Sky. So first game of the season, it'll be interesting to. I won't be going to MK Dons, but obviously we'll be at the home game the week after against Salford. So it'll be interesting to see how we get on. We were really positive, Jace, last time we spoke. Still feeling positive towards the new season as we are now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do think you're still looking at that league and thinking it's there for us, really, isn't it? Really, that everything, it's a weaker league. We ended last season in really good momentum, and overall our record, like I said earlier, since Alexander took charge, gives us a lot of hope. We've got a good, talented squad there, some really good options. We haven't talked about Jake Young, but the fact he'll be back and people like that, I think
Yeah.
there's a lot there to like about what we can do this season. So yeah, I am positive about our prospects. I think that I am encouraged by the noises we've heard over the last few days in terms of Stefan Rupp coming over and the comments he's made in the media and at the fans forum. And like I said, David Sharp seems really impressive. I think the club has learned a lot of lessons, and there was a lot of criticism last season. And I think what you can say was justifiably. It was a bit of a tipping point moment last season, I think, for me, where it became certainly very clear to me, watching and writing about the football club, that the model we were working, the sustainable model, and the way that we were being, owned as a football club, the passive owner, it wasn't working, and it just wasn't going to bring success. And that's obviously, a lot of people got more and more frustrated. This led to criticism, led to protest, led to things like the independent supporters group forming and things like that. And I think that was all in for the best, because the club has listened. They've realised too they can't carry on this way, and the fact that they're talking about the fact that if we stayed as a sustainable football club, we'd be left behind. It shows that there's been a real realisation, I think, for everyone really connected with the football club, that we couldn't carry on as we are. So the fact that we are changing things around is encouraging to me. I know that we will talk about, well, there's not enough signings being made, but for me, I'd almost be worried if we were just chucking a load of money on the pitch right now, because that isn't sustainable. That's what we did, like, for example, in 2008 or 9 season, when Mark Lawton had sort of got his feet under the table and give Stuart McCall a huge budget, and when we didn't go up, suddenly we were struggling. I want to see us invest more into football club, but I want it to be on infrastructure. I want us to improve things for the long term, not just let's sign Charlie White because he's a big name and that'll get people on side. It's got to be a longer term plan than that. And what I've seen so far all suggests that. So yeah, I am encouraged. Looking forward to it. Me and you after the Charlie game, aren't we, in a couple of weeks' time, and bring it on. It's going to be good.
All starts again, doesn't it? Happy days. Hopefully we'll be celebrating this time next year. Thanks very much, Jason, for joining us again, and we'll speak soon.